So these ships are zipping around and they're going over towards North Africa to bomb some of French North Africa. They realize their days are numbered, so they start sailing east, and they try to get some coal here and there, some neutral countries, and they are sailing and they need to escape. But here's the bottom line, and this is so crazy. I don't really want to slam history teachers in the United States today, but the idea that you could teach history without maps, I just don't get it. It's sort of like if we called our body the body, and no matter whether I pointed there or pointed at my knee, we'd call it the body and not say knee and nose or ear or anything else. Well, the Mediterranean is a sea that's broken up into different pieces, and then there's a bunch of islands in there as well. And this story today is so crazy, and if you don't have the maps that go along with what I'm saying, it would be so hard to follow along unless you really knew most of the islands and the parts of the Mediterranean Sea. This is about a dreadnought. A dreadnought is a kind of battleship that was developed in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and it sort of put all wooden ships to, shame, and it was just a powerful big ship. And they made basically all other ships obsolete. So the reason they matter is that Britain had the biggest navy ever in, let's say, 1870, and no one even compared. But once the dreadnought was invented and you started building them, and since they could wipe out wooden ships so easy, when Germany started building them and Britain got nervous and started building them and they spent so much money, everybody's prestige was at odds, and it also is one of the biggest reasons why the British and the Germans had hostilities into the early 1900s that did help, didn't cause, but did help the British decision to go to war with Germany in World War I. This episode in the Mediterranean changed World War I completely, and it's all because the Germans had two ships, the Goeben and WWI, in the Mediterranean when World War I was breaking out. And they said, well, we need to get them out of the port and get them out, maybe get them through Gibraltar and get them over back to Germany. And as you look at the map there, that's tricky because Gibraltar is owned by Britain. And so once Britain and Germany were not friends, you're kind of bottled up in the Mediterranean. And the only other way out of the Mediterranean is the Suez Canal, which was owned by Britain at the time too. So these ships are zipping around and they're going over towards North Africa to bomb some of French North Africa. They realize their days are numbered, so they start sailing east, and they try to get some coal here and there, some neutral countries, and they are sailing and they need to escape. And I have up on the screen the book called The Escape of the Goeben. It is a very important book as far as how well it describes all that I'm going to talk about now. But here's the bottom line, and this is so crazy. The Goeben is a German dreadnought, but it's in the Mediterranean because one of Germany's allies is Austria-Hungary, and there's a map there. You can see the coastline of Austria-Hungary. And the Goeben is commissioned back in 1911. And it sets sail, and it's zipping around the Mediterranean when the World War I starts, and it is going to escape towards Turkey. Now, that's a curveball because Turkey was neutral, and it turns out that Turkey had raised money across the countryside to build a dreadnought and had Britain build them one. And then when the war started, Britain said, I'm sorry, I'm not going to give those to you. And Ottoman Turkey was really angry. But they weren't in a powerful position to do anything, so they were just angry. So when the German ships came over to these very thin straits called the Dardanelles and asked for permission to come through, that's why the Turks said okay. The Turks let those ships come in and escape the British and French navies because Britain had confiscated the two ships that the Turks had contracted with the British. In August 10th of 1914, the ships went through the Dardanelles. Within a week, they transferred the ship to the Ottomans. In other words, like they sold it for a really cheap bargain. The cheap bargain included having the German sailors on the ship change their uniforms and change the flag to an Ottoman flag. But still Germans were running that ship, and they went into the Black Sea, and then they went up towards the Crimean Peninsula, a topic that I've had several videos on, and bombarded Sevastopol, a Russian fort on the Crimean Peninsula. And the Russians sitting in that fort look through their little binoculars and go, well, there's an Ottoman flag. So on November 1st, 1914, the Russians declared war on the Ottomans because of a German ship and went to war with the Ottomans. Oh my gosh, the world changes completely. Because if you look at the map that I've put up there, if Germany, Austria-Hungary, and now the Ottoman Turks are all friends, how does Russia get supplied? In other words, Russia was not as industrialized as Britain and France and Germany, so it's not going to take long to run out of bullets. Well, if you look at the map, it's really tricky because the Germans put mines over by Denmark, so that made that seaway tough. The seaway above Norway is frozen half the year, so that was tough. Germany's not going to go, sure, you can do things through me. Austria is not going to. And then if you look at the Balkans, Serbia was actually conquered, and Bulgaria joined the Central Powers, the same team as Germany, Austria, and Ottomans. And so if you look, there's like a cordon, a wall that blocks off Russia from the West, and Russia will lose World War I because they're undersupplied. They don't have enough industrialization to keep up with a war like World War I. They will lose World War I to Germany. They will have a revolution that will lead to communist Russia occurring in World War I in 1917. And I don't know what would have or wouldn't have happened had not the Goeben become an Ottoman ship and then bomb a Russian city. But if you look at the map again, holy cow, were they cut off. And so they really were beaten in large part because they didn't have enough industrialization to do it on their own, and they were cut off from their industrial allies. And so Russia would collapse, have a revolution, quit World War I, and just be a crazy mess. All because this ship came in. The Germans sold that ship for 80 million marks. That's not very much money for a dreadnought. But this I thought was really interesting. In 1963, same year JFK was assassinated, just to put things in perspective, the Turkish government offered West Germany the ship back so they could put it in a museum because it was such an important impact on how World War I happened. And Germany said, nah, I really don't want everybody in Germany to be remembering that chapter, so you just keep it. Because the Ottomans came in that war, and they were also unprepared for that war, they would lose all their Middle Eastern territories from the areas of Iraq down to Israel, and all those territories would become new countries like Palestine, Jordan, called Transjordan, Syria, Lebanon, Iraq. And the way that that happened would not have happened without the Ottomans joining the wrong team, the losing team in World War I. And that has had nothing but disaster in the Middle East since the end of World War I. So, wow, those two ships escaping to the Ottomans changed world history completely. And again, I plead with all you U.S. history teachers that ever watch this, teach maps with your lessons so that people know where you're talking about. If I said I have an infection in my leg, that's way different than an infection in my brain, and people need to know where we are.